How many times have you experienced a dough that just sticks to everything? Or a loaf that kind of morphs into some sort of pancake in the oven while it's baking? Or even worse, a gummy crumb? Well, if that's you, then I'm going to teach you how to balance your hydration correctly so it suits your flour, your climate and your experience. Because when we get all of this fine-tuned, you're going to enjoy your baking sessions so much more, and you'll produce loaves that spring in the oven and reveal a properly baked crumb. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hang on a minute, Phil, what's balancing hydration? I just follow the recipe. In fact, I'm following your recipe. Well, to be fair, that could be the root of your problem, because in most cases, the flour that I bake with at home will be different to yours, and that comes with some serious issues for the home baker, because different flour has different absorption capabilities. You can think of it a bit like a sponge. So my strong bread flour may be able to soak up, I don't know, 80% of its own weight in water comfortably. But your softer flour, well, that can only absorb about 65% before it turns into some kind of sticky mess. But that's not the end of the story. What happens if we both use the same flour and the same hydration, but we live in different climates? My kitchen's 30 degrees Celsius and yours is 20. Well, my dough will feel softer and possibly be harder to handle, while yours, it may be stiffer and you can move it around easily. And if that wasn't enough, we've got to factor in our level of experience. Let's say we're both baking in the same kitchen right next to each other. So we've got the same flour, hydration and climate. Do you think things would be equal? Well, if you're a beginner, probably not. You may find the same hydration to be a bit too sticky. So, in most cases, there are three main factors that we need to consider when we're trying to kind of balance our hydration properly. How thirsty is the flour? What's the temperature or the climate? And our level of skill or experience. Now, how the heck do you work out that puzzle? Well, there's no magic formula, but you can use a really simple tool and a simple method to do it. Okay, so you need to find yourself a recipe calculator. You can use any calculator you like. Mine is linked below because, well, that's the one that I'm going to be demonstrating on. Now, for this experiment, you're only going to be tweaking the columns that are on the left-hand side, and the ingredients for the recipe, well, they're displayed on the right. So, what should our first decision be? Well, we need to know how much dough we're going to make, and that's going to depend on the basket we use to prove our dough in. My oval proving baskets hold about 800 grams of dough nicely, and my larger round baskets hold about 1 kilo. So for this, I'm going to use my favourite oval basket, and at the top of the calculator, I'll add my desired dough weight of 800 grams. Now, inoculation levels, they're out the scope of this video, but for the purpose of this experiment, I'm going to suggest that you leave the leaven at 20%, and remember that it should be 100% hydrated. Now you need to decide on which flour or blend of flour that you want to balance the hydration for. So I'm going to be using a strong white bread flour, and that's got a protein content of 12%. And I'm going to use a whole wheat flour with a protein content of 10%. Now for an everyday sourdough loaf, I'll add about 10% of whole wheat flour, and I'm going to leave that salt content at 2%. Now we're on to the biggie, the hydration, and who can guess where I'm going to tell you to start? Well, we're going to be tucking our egos away for this one. We're going to bring the hydration all the way down to 65%. And it's that simple. That's our recipe done and dusted. On the right hand side, we've got all of our ingredient weights ready to use in the recipe. Right, there's nothing left to do. You need to get into the kitchen and you need to test bake. You need to assess the process from the start through to the finish. How does the dough feel after you mixed it? The dough's always going to be stickiest at this point because the flour hasn't had a chance to absorb the water. But take a note of how the dough feels. How does the dough feel after it's rested before you give it a quick knead? You're going to be shocked at how much the dough changes. Time will have worked its magic. But again, make some notes. Is the dough easy to stretch or to laminate? It should be tacky, but it shouldn't be breaking up or sticking like glue. Is the dough easy to shape? Does it hold its shape or does it collapse all over your work surface? Can you easily move that dough around? Another big telltale sign is how the dough behaves when you turn it out of its basket and you score it. The dough should be soft, but it should sit up proud and not sink and spread all over your peel. And of course you need to assess the final loaf. Did it collapse during baking or has it retained its volume and sprung up in the oven? Now you go back to your formula and you adjust the hydration. You're going to tweak it by just 2%. If the dough was too sticky, you'll reduce the hydration, and if it was too stiff, you'll increase the hydration. It's not rocket science. Now you can use that new formula and you'll test bake again and then repeat. By doing this, you're going to find the sweet spot for hydration, and it's going to take into account your flour's absorption capabilities, your climate, and your skill level. And remember, rarely in sourdough baking is something a one and done. If you change your flour, or you add things to the dough, or the seasons change, or you get better at handling the dough, you're going to need to tweak that formula once more. Now I've used this exact system or method to comfortably balance the hydration so that I can make sourdough using really soft all-purpose flour. In fact, Chin, she's one of our home bakers in our coaching community, and she's successfully baking sourdough while incorporating quite a large amount of rice flour into her dough. And trust me, that produces a really soft dough. Look, my point is this: it's easy to blame our flour choice for a poor outcome, but our skill and our climate also factor heavily. And ultimately, we do have some control over the situation, and that control is balancing our hydration correctly. A huge thank you for watching. I'll see you again very soon. Stay tuned.